Nolan Powell. He is a really, really good, could be an elite defensive lineman. McKinley Jackson out of Lucedale, Mississippi. He was hurt a lot last year. That's their best defensive tackle. If they're healthy on that defensive line, that's going to change a lot. Again, I don't believe we should have rankings in college football until about the middle of October. Appalachian State goes on the road, beats Texas A&M when they were number 6 in the country in College Station, 17-10. That A&M team was not the number 6 team in the country then or ever at any point last season. All right, let's flip over here. Interesting to hear people say, well, who's the best quarterback coming back in the SEC? I think it's KJ Jefferson at Arkansas. He gets a lot of criticism, but he doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. He runs the ball more than I would like as a fan, and he gets hurt, but he throws as one of our, I think it was Roman Harper said on here, he throws as pretty a deep ball as you'll see from a quarterback. And if he'll keep the runs down, but again, when you're 6'3" or 6'4", 245 pounds that can run like that, you're a weapon, and you're going to do it. Given the opportunity, if he sees an opening, yeah, he's going to do it because that's a first down. Good luck trying to stop him in the open field. Okay, Jaden Daniels, dual threat quarterback for sure, came from Arizona State to LSU. They won 10 games last year, but they got drilled at the end of the season by Texas A&M. Brian Kelly, people got a year on him. They got a book on him. Of course, he was at Notre Dame for a long time. They had the winningest coach in school history up there. They knew a lot about him. But I will say this time around, Brian Kelly, they recruited really well. Again, the more you're in the league, the more people are familiar with you. And if you're not constantly evolving and innovating and making changes to what you're doing, both offensively and defensively, people figure you out. You either adjust and adapt on the run, or you become obsolete overnight. That's how this stuff works. You go around the SEC West. Look at Texas A&M. We talked about LSU. We talked about Arkansas. Look at Auburn and Alabama. Connor O'Gara had a good piece in the last few days. It was in Doug Dean's AU Dose. Who has the better quarterback room at this time, Auburn or Alabama? Well, in terms of upside, you look at Tyler Buckner coming in from Notre Dame, Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson, versus Auburn's quarterback room of, I'm just thinking here, Holden Gehringer hasn't even really played any. Okay. He has not really played at all. Robbie Ashford last year, after 2 years of playing baseball at Oregon, he was put out there last year and, was forced to be in a situation where his throwing mechanics and all, he's got a lot of work to do. And you sit there and you think, how's he going to get better? Well, when you can run like that, and he's the fastest quarterback, I think he's faster than Nick Marshall, but he can't throw like Nick Marshall. But if Hugh Freeze is good at anything, he's great at developing quarterbacks. Okay, so I would keep my eyes open on that Auburn quarterback situation. But the one quarterback that I just mentioned out of all of them, Ty Simpson, has a lot of upside potential. Came in as a 5-star, and he's only going to get better, but he's got a lot of work to do in terms of development as a quarterback. He's 19? But Jalen Milroe, I don't think he's the answer. Tyler Buckner, you're going to find out. But if Tyler Buckner had stayed at Notre Dame, was he going to still be the starter and beat out Sam Hartman, who transferred in from Wake Forest. He broke every record you can break at Wake Forest and a lot of ACC records. All right. So that's a real, you can debate that. And if he wasn't good enough to be the starter at Notre Dame, how's that going to translate into the SEC? Again, we'll get into that. Nobody knows because they haven't played yet. Rodney Orr will have a take on it. I can assure you he'll have a good take on that, a good angle. But, Peyton Thorne coming in to Auburn, he's got 26 starts under his belt at Michigan State. Okay. He's got a body of work, but when the running game wasn't there last year versus the previous year, he struggled. All right. Lots to talk about. We'll take a quick commercial break. Rob Browne with you here on Sidelines, right back after this message.
Hey y'all, it's Ainsley from Hewlett & Dunn, just coming to let you know about our new collection of boots. It's going to be our dress boots. They're the Horsepower collection, and they're genuine exotic leathers and really comfortable. Comes in all different sizes and patterns, so come check them out.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Hi, Rob Browne back here with you on this Saturday morning. Like I said, Yancy Porter is supposed to join us, Rebel Yell Hotline. We'll get him back on next week. Had a tooth pulled, ripped out of the roots, and unable to talk. So that's one of the things about being on a sports radio show and podcast. You got to be verbalized and get him back on. But Rodney Orr, Mobile and Corpus Christi, Texas, Tighter Insider, only $48. That is much to pay for just absolutely unlimited access and information to what goes on with Crimson Tide athletics. And as he talks about a lot, the message boards, the forums, and you got fans of a lot of different schools, I'm sure, that get together. And that's what we do on this show is we have these SEC roundtables and Southern college sports, and we get into all the other conferences in America because we play them. But Rodney, we were talking before the break about the quarterback situation. There's an interesting piece that Connor O'Gara wrote Saturday Down South about the quarterback rooms at Auburn and Alabama. And there's some favorite of Alabama is favored as in terms of upside, and then there's experience. You look at, Robbie Ashford, but, that is all so debatable. And then I look back at Tyler Buckner, coming in. You can say, would he have beaten out Sam Hartman had he stayed at Notre Dame? We don't know. We don't know any of that. All we know is how many starts officially that Tyler Buckner had at Notre Dame, but he's going to have a lot of talent around him. And if the offensive line is better and they got a deep running back room at Alabama, it doesn't matter what school it is, but in this case, Alabama, that helps a lot for the transition, doesn't it?
No doubt. No doubt. I think Alabama, offensive line, I think it should be improved. I think this might be the best offensive line they've had since 2020. Really encouraged by the things I've heard about the offensive line, the progress they made in the spring. I think a lot of young players have developed. I think they've got a different mindset too, Rob. I think this team, again, this is not a prediction in terms of, I think it's going to be, a 15-0 team or anything like that. Yeah. I mean, I just don't know. You don't really know. But I do think the one thing I have seen, and especially in A-Day, was a different mindset. And that's on both sides of the ball. But I think with the offensive line, I think there's a different mindset there. They want to be physical. They want to control the line of scrimmage. They want to be able to run the ball effectively. Now, let's say this, too, is I know that a lot of Alabama fans think that, hey, we're going back to, running the ball 60 times a game and maybe we'll throw it 10 or 12. No, that's not going to be the philosophy. I think, as you pointed out, Tommy Rees wants to use all the playmakers. They want to be able to spread the field in terms of, making plays down the field, using every part of the field, using the tight ends, all of those things. They want to still throw the ball and do those things, play action passes. Those are the things that they really want to do, have balance, be able to run the ball effectively. And to be honest with you, as much as it pains me to say this, Rob, you look at Georgia's offense last year.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of offense that, I think that's probably the idea. Be able to throw the football effectively and be able to run it. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the thing that Alabama's moving back towards. Maybe something similar to 2020, similar.
Yeah. Well, that 2020 offense was one of the most prolific in Alabama history.
And I don't know that they'll be that good. That's not my prediction.
Yeah, I got you. But I'm saying that was a hell of an offense. I mean, they pulled a World Wrestling Federation curb stomping of Ohio State in the national championship game. Ohio State played 3 games that year, I think, but by an act of Congress and God, they were, got to put them in the championship game. But, oh, man. Let's talk about when you were on Tuesday on the May Veterinary Clinic Tighter Insider Report. Of course, May Veterinary Clinic since 1964, Tuscaloosa and Northport, 2 locations. Open every day of the week, Sundays, 3 to 5 p.m., drop off and pick up at Camp May Doggy Daycare. They also have connecting cat condos. Dr. Wayne May started it all in 1964. No matter where you are, if you love your dogs and your cats, yourself and give birthday, get them in to the May Veterinary Clinic, to the great veterinarians and the great folks down there in Tuscaloosa. But Rodney, let's talk about that running back room. We didn't have a lot of time Tuesday to get into it. It flies when you're on here because it's a lot of fun, but these Saturday roundtables got a little more time. The big kid, Justin Haynes out of Buford, Georgia. When you say Atlanta, Metro Atlanta, 6.5 million people, 22 counties. But, man, Alabama, like Auburn, goes up in that area and recruits heavily. There's a ton of talent over there. How good can this kid be? And talk about McClellan. Let's talk about Roydell Williams out of Hueytown, because there's some talent there, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually on the show here, Ryan Fowler's show here yesterday, and he asked me if I thought, Justice Haynes could be the guy in that running back room. And, look, I think he's extremely talented. There is no doubt. I mean, he can do it all. And I think he's going to be really good. and I think he'll be good this year. I think he'll make a major contribution. But I do think this too. I think that Jace McClellan, we haven't seen the best of him. I thought a couple of years ago he was on his way to being really good as a sophomore. Then he tore up his knee, had surgery. Last year he bounced back. We saw him in the Texas game. He flashed a little bit in that game of what he's capable of doing on that 80-yard touchdown run. But he just didn't get enough carries. A lot of the carries went to Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, obviously a top 12 pick, a really good back. But, I don't think Jace got enough touches to allow him to show what he can do. And then later in the season, you saw it against Ole Miss. They turned to Jace more. He ran between the tackles. He ran with power. He can catch the football extremely well. And, again, he can make big plays. So I think Jace has got a lot of things that people are going to see this year. Jace, Roydell Williams. Obviously Roydell's been around for a while. Roydell's probably I don't want to say he's the best short yardage back they've got because Haynes is pretty good. But, Roydell's a really good back. And then also, don't forget Jam Miller. I'm telling you, Jam Miller is like really, really good. He is a guy that I would probably compare to Josh Jacobs. I think he can be really good. So they have a real quartet of backs.
Yeah. And, running back by committee seems to be more and more the way to go. Is it, I guess there's two ways I'm going to ask this question. Is it the players are saying, hey, I only want 10 to 12 carries a game because I want to save my body? Or the coaches are saying, hey, I only want you getting 12 or, so carries a game because I want to save your body for long term. And they're trying to keep everybody in that room happy. And it's so easy to transfer. You got to do everything you can to just keep the guys you got. Is it a little bit of everything?
Well, I think there's kind of a happy medium there. You have to be able to get the ball in the guys' hands enough to get them into a rhythm. And that's why four backs, utilizing four backs may be tough this year or any year. But I think that, you've got to be able to get them the ball enough to get them into a rhythm. You saw Najee Harris. I mean, Najee, until he started getting the ball, he wasn't nearly as effective. Once he started getting the ball, Najee started making plays. But at the same time, when you have so many different playmakers, it's hard to, you don't really want to toss it to a guy like you did Derrick Henry 45 times a game. And he's different. I mean, he was a workhorse. He could take it. He's an anomaly. But no, I think it's all of the things you mentioned, and I do think too, you want to keep guys fresh. I mean, if you have three guys or whatever that you can rotate in there during the course of the game, and then in the fourth quarter, you're trying to put a team away. You're trying to, run the clock. When you have a run game, you have fresh backs, you have a really strong physical offensive line. Then all of a sudden, these guys are fresh and they're still running hard.
Well, you mentioned, the big backs, and it's so hard, to think about a guy carrying the ball 40 plus carries in a game. Derrick Henry, and when he played down in Yulee, Florida, which is not too far from Jacksonville and Palatka in that area, he ran for over 12,000 yards in high school. I think everybody remembers his, entree onto the national scene in the 2013, the Sugar Bowl game against Oklahoma. And you saw this big guy just bolt out of the backfield, just bolt upright. Sounds like one of those actor names on the Beverly Hillbillies. Bolt upright and dash rip rock. But anyway, I was like, that's Brandon Jacobs with better speed. Mm-hmm. This guy, he is an anomaly. But, when you look at what he does in terms of taking care of his body, he's got a long future, in the NFL. And it'll be fun to watch, as he gets older. He probably won't carry as much. But then you mentioned Joshua Jacobs. That kid was tough just because of what he had to deal with off the football field, Rodney.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
you're right. You're right. And he's a great story too, Rob. And what I mean by that is you said off the field, and probably many people know the details that I think they were homeless there in Tulsa for a while and
yeah,
all of those things. But Rob, the crazy thing about him is he was a high school. His senior year, he played quarterback. He had no offers. They lined him up in the shotgun or whatever you want to call it, wildcat, and he ran the zone read 179 times for 2,700 and something yards and 39 touchdowns. And I mean, it was like, and nobody. I mean, he had Missouri State, a couple offers like that, and there was a guy in the state of Texas that reached out to someone I know and said, "Hey, this guy's interested in Alabama." This is 3 weeks before signing day. 3 weeks before signing day. He's interested in Alabama. No, he doesn't have any offers. Oklahoma's looking at him. He's got some small offers. Missouri has just offered him or whatever. And you think Alabama would be interested. And I'm sitting here thinking, very unlikely. But he sends the link to Burton Burns, who was the running backs coach at Alabama at the time, and said, Coach, what do you think about this guy? He wants to come to Alabama. Burns was blown away. He goes to Tulsa. He checks the kid out. This is 3 weeks before signing day, less than 3 weeks now. Comes back, and Saban says, "Okay, what's wrong with that kid?" And Burton Burns said, "Nothing, Coach. He's got it all." And he's like, "Well, why isn't anybody offering?" He said, "They're missing out. Alabama signed him, and you see what happened."
Yeah. Well, wasn't that a similar situation when they recruited a quarterback out of Channelview, Texas, over there, in the Houston metro area, out in the Bay, Jalen Hurts? And I think,
well, I'll tell you this: even when Hurts committed, there was a thing that people don't know that Alabama, Kiffin would never admit this.
Yeah,
he wanted a transfer quarterback from Montana State named, I think it was Dak Procup or something like that, who ended up going to Oregon. And if Procup would have transferred here, I don't think Hurts would have came. I think he'd have switched probably to Mississippi State or somebody else. But Kiffin wouldn't admit that. I know he wouldn't. I think Saban liked this kid too, Procup, but he visited here or talked to Saban and Kiffin about maybe coming here, but he was already so locked in with Oregon. He went there, and Hurts came here, and they just didn't have any. Well, that's not the best way to put it. The quarterbacks here at the time didn't have any experience. Yeah. And I think it opened the door for Jalen Hurts as a true freshman. And, he was just a really mature kid. I mean, he was, he wasn't a great passer, but he was good enough.
Yeah. And it's funny, Dan Enos had an impact on him a lot more than people realize. They want to say it all happened when he went to Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley. Talk about what Dan Enos does with quarterbacks from your angle.
Well, I be honest with you, I know Enos gets a lot of credit, but I think the best thing that ever happened to Jalen Hurts was Tua, because it really allowed Jalen Hurts some time to step back and work on his game, focus on things that he needed to do to get better, to improve. And, he did. He overcame a lot of the things that a lot of his limitations as a passer, and I think he grew as a passer that year. In 2018. And then when he got his opportunity, he came off the bench when Tua got hurt against Georgia, and, he redeemed himself. And, there's one thing for sure. Jalen Hurts is probably as strong a competitor as there is. And he's like Derrick Henry, the guy just really wants it. So he'll do, whatever it takes to try to be successful. And, I doubted that he would be an NFL quarterback, honestly, but at the same time, he has. I still don't think he's the greatest passer. I think what it is he's gotten into a really good system with a lot of great players around him, a lot of great coaching, and he does what Jalen does. He's a really good manager of the offense. He's obviously very dangerous as a runner. and he's an effective passer. But I think it's just more than that about Jalen. I just think it's, he's a baller. That's the only way you can really put it.
Yeah, and he's going to find excuses to win and adapt to what he's got. And that might be quote of the day so far is the best thing to happen to Jalen Hurts was Tua. And,
right.
And you look at that succession of quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts, Tua, Mac Jones, Bryce Young. And here it is. Bryce Young's the number one pick in the draft. And, we talk, and you do too, with NFL people. And, you ask Jim Nagy, executive director of the Reese's Mobile Senior Bowl, does character, off the field issues play into the evaluation process? Hell yeah, it does. I mean, of course it does. And I think anybody that's the sports fan who's ever played sports cannot help but marvel and look with a lot of awe and respect at the way he handled it when Tua took over and won that national championship game against Georgia. And in 2018, he was the backup. But when they called his number in the SEC championship game, he didn't hesitate. He put it on the line, went in head first for that touchdown, got him into the national championship game.
Well, let me say this. Go ahead.
Hold these thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. I missed the timer. I will be right back. Rodney Orr, Tyler, Insiders.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Okay, Rob Browne back here continuing this discussion with Rodney Orr. Went to that break kind of hastily. Did not mean to cut you off, but Rodney, pick up. You were making some really salient points before we had to break.
Well, you were
salient points.
Yeah. No, I was thinking you mentioned about that time frame in 2017-18 when Tua took over from Jalen, and what a great teammate Jalen was and all of that during that time. Listen, I'll say this. I don't think things were nearly as smooth as what it's portrayed to be. But I'll say this. I think it was more Nick Saban, and that's where Nick Saban's greatness comes in as a manager of a program. And I think, you had a guy that had started 28 games, was 26-2. It was a freshman, as a true freshman, was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year, and all of those things, and all the things that Jalen had helped Alabama achieve over those 2 years. And then all of a sudden he loses his job. It didn't go as smoothly as people. I mean, it's not like he just sat there and said, "Okay, this guy's better than me." I mean, no, there was some touchy moments. You can bet on that.
Yeah.
But it was Nick Saban that just as a coach, the things he did to keep that situation from going somewhere where you didn't want it to go.
Well, I agree with you, and I'm glad that you said that, because I wouldn't think, and when after listening to what you just said, I couldn't imagine it was easy, but it just was kept out of the public. I mean, people that are competitive, which is, you better have everybody on your team better be competitive. That's right. That's how it goes.
Well, let's say this too. Now, again, I'm not implying there was anything personal. I do think Tua and Jalen had a pretty good relationship, and I think a lot of that Tua was just the kind of kid Tua was and is. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it was personal really on either side. But like you said, they're competitors.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about a guy like Joshua Jacobs, that sports background, that competitiveness got him and his dad, off the streets into where they are now. He's a first round draft pick, of the Raiders? I mean, that's the American dream. I mean, and I think that's why so many kids transfer today, Rodney, is a culture, not everywhere, but it's an accepted norm now. It's just not okay, in my opinion, to let kids quit. I mean, quit bad habits, yeah, okay. But, you want them to fight. And when you see a running back room with 3 or 4 guys like what you have at Alabama or what they have at Auburn and Georgia, and those guys are sticking around, that's a good sign. That's good. Parents, good family. That's good character. You want that. All right, let's look on the defensive line. You go back and you think about some, Ashawn Robinson, Quinnen Williams, Marcel Darius. There have been so many great ones. The big kid out of Shades Valley, big defensive lineman that picked up, they actually threw a pass to him. Which national championship game was that? I kind of lose track.
Well, you're talking about Deron Payne. You talking about the Clemson game and the Sugar Bowl before they played Georgia for the national championship. So it was a semifinal game.
Yeah, that's right. But those kind of defensive linemen, are there any like that you see? That's a big ask here. But do you see anybody like that? Because those are generational talents. But talk about, because if you got a strong interior push for your front seven and you're 2 and 3 deep, that's how you win them all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I don't know. I wouldn't compare anybody to Deron Payne. I mean, that guy was a freak, from the moment he got here.
Yeah.
But I do think they have some good players. I think the key for Alabama's defensive line is developing those players and getting them the fullest potential out of them. And I think when you look at a guy like Jaheim Otis, I think he has star potential. I mean, I think he can be a really dominant player, and he's got a great story. I mean, I remember the day he committed to Alabama out of Columbia, Mississippi. I called his high school coach, and his coach said, look, I asked coach, I said, do you think this is firm? I mean, I know how these Mississippi schools are. They don't give up on these kids. And he was like, well, look, the one thing that sets Alabama apart in my mind is the strength and conditioning program that they have and the nutritional program that they have. Those things are the best in the country. They'll take this kid. He's overweight. They'll get him into great shape. And that's why I hope that he sticks with Alabama. He said, because I think they can get the most out of him in that regard. So I say that to say this. It's an interesting story about him. He showed up at 416 pounds. Okay. He's lost over 100 pounds, Rob. In a year, he lost over 100 pounds. Okay. And he played last year and was really good as a true freshman. But now he's looking to gain a little bit of weight. How does that strike you? I mean, so with that said, I think he can be a dominant force inside. I think Justin Aboybe's return, last year he was off to a good start. Then he injured his neck and he sat out the rest of the year. Now he's back. He had a really good spring, even though he was somewhat limited. I think they're very encouraged by what he can do. I will say this. I think Tim Smith, and I've been saying this since the day Alabama got him or he committed or whatever. Tim Smith he has All-American potential. That's just my opinion. I mean, I saw it as a freshman. I think that he hasn't really improved dramatically since he's been here. I think he can, well, maybe in some ways. Again, I don't want to, but I think Tim Smith, if he plays up to his potential, he can be a dominant player. So those are 3 guys. They've got a lot of other guys, they're obviously, Damon Payne played some last year. I think Monkel Goodwine is a name for, these Alabama fans out there listening to keep an ear out for, because I think he's got a chance to finally make a move. He's been here a couple of years. He's a redshirt sophomore. But James Smith, the true freshman out of Montgomery, was a 5-star rated player, had a really good spring. he would be another one. And there's other guys. I mean, you could go down the list, but those are some of the guys. Yeah, I think they certainly have a chance to be pretty good up front. I think they have the players to be.
And then you look outside of Alabama with the depth that they have. This was the number one recruiting class in the country this past year. Wouldn't you say, I guess for any school, you want to get 2 or 3 difference makers every year in recruiting on offense and defense, and then somebody on special teams every year. So if you're getting that after 4 or 5 years, you've got 25 of these guys, maybe 30 on the team. And that first 44 has got to be really good. 45 to 85, they've got to be, I guess, players that can be developed. If you don't follow that, it's kind of a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
I think that's the one thing too about these last couple of recruiting classes that Alabama's had. I think Alabama missed on some of that, and then I think especially this last class, as I look at it, they probably did a much better job of getting those types of guys. And here's I'll point out a few. You mentioned Justice Haynes. I think he's one. I think Jam Miller from the year before is probably one. I think that Caden Proctor was a huge pickup, obviously. I think Malik Benson may be kind of that guy, wide receiver. I think he's got the potential. I think on the defensive side, there's probably several guys. Maybe Jihad Campbell would be one. I think that Keon Keeley will prove to be one. I think Caleb Downs will prove to be one. I think possibly Des Ricks eventually. So, I've rattled off a few names from this class, and there's others we could mention. But I think all of those guys are kind of fit the mold of what helped Alabama be successful in that stretch run that they've had.
Yeah. And then you look around in the SEC, who's got 2 and 3 deep at every position on a front 7? LSU's trying to get it. A&M trying to get it. Auburn, a lot of work to do. Ole Miss, Mississippi State, no. Arkansas, not yet. And then flip over there to the East, Georgia for sure. Tennessee getting there, but after that, so really you got 4 teams, right now it's Alabama, LSU, Georgia, and Tennessee. Would you say that's the top 4 teams in the SEC heading into next year? Now, there can be some surprises with the portal. We all know that, but based on everything at this very moment.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I haven't really thought about how they rank, but I think those are probably the top ones. Those, if you ask me to predict right now who would win the East and the West, they would come from that group. I mean, well, obviously there's not a group in the East. I mean, let's be honest. It's Georgia and everybody else isn't very good. I mean, well, like you said, Tennessee obviously has made a lot of strides. Yeah. Again, can they, get over the hump and beat Georgia? That still remains to be seen.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the big issue is that, you look at a school like Kentucky tries to get there, but they go back to doing things that make them Kentucky. And it's just unbelievable. And then you look at you've seen so many coaches come through. For Nick Saban, he's not old. He signed that long-term contract. So on paper, he's there at least another 7 years. But what does he have to do as a coach when he's going out to recruit, other coaches to come in? Does he need to say, hey, I only want them if they've been at winning programs? And B, I only want them if they're great recruiters. C, I only want them if they're great at developing talent, because Alabama will recruit itself. Which of those is most important to him, just in your opinion?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's they're different in terms of. I mean, yeah, you got to have guys who can know how to relate to the players. Understand the kids nowadays. I think it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work ethic. to be here to coach for, Saban and, all great coaches. I mean, it's a demanding position to be an assistant coach, in a successful program. But no, I think being able to relate to the players, being able to coach them, I think that the recruiting aspect of it is extremely important as well. And it's, again, I go back to work ethic. It's about, in recruiting, you've got to be able to know the prospects. And when I say know them, know who they are. I mean, you can't, I've heard of coaches here, and I say here, I'm not referring to Alabama, but, coaches not knowing who's in which kid's a rising junior or a rising sophomore. I mean, you've got to know. That takes work. That takes time. So all of those things, I think Saban just wants a guy that's, obviously a great coach in terms of those things, and a great recruiter as well.
Yeah. And the coaches, Rodney, do you believe that the NIL and the portal are driving a lot of coaches out? And I'm going to focus just on football. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, without a doubt. There's coaches right now that are in the NFL that were formerly in college that have said, and I'm getting this pretty much firsthand, Rob. I mean, that they will never come back to college football as long as there's the NIL and there's the portal. They don't want any part of it.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of the way it is. It's really tough. I mean, it was stressful enough.
Yeah.
I mean, for coaches, I don't know how they do it, but I guess, $10 million will motivate you to do it. But, I just think it's really, really stressful for them. And this NIL, this portal, managing a roster every year, managing egos, all of these things. It's extremely difficult. The NFL is a much easier job in those ways.
Yeah. And you're hearing, and I hear it from coaches will tell you off the record, they hate NIL. They despise it because they're going, my job is to recruit. And, look, you've got to recruit and you've got to do all this stuff. But when the kids are coming in that haven't accomplished anything on a smaller scale, you got kids that they want their allowance, yet they hadn't cut the yard yet.
Well, I think most coaches would probably say they don't really hate NIL. They hate what NIL has become.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm saying, Rob? And what I mean by that is it wasn't the original intention, and I'm not going to blame Jimbo Fisher or anybody. Okay. But, Texas A&M went out there and basically, did this in terms of offering all these big deals to kids and had this incredible recruiting class. And I'm not just saying Texas A&M, just use them for an example. Yeah. But that's really where it's gone when the original intention was not that at all. I mean, but you know what I mean? The original intention was for the kids when they got here and they earned opportunities to get NIL and not to buy them out of high school.
Yeah. And that's what they've become, hadn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, kids want deals. I mean, kids, what are you going to give me? I heard listen, I heard an SEC coach. This is just this past week. It's not a head coach. Okay, just this past week, was saying how he wanted to get. He was already getting tired of the way it is right now, the environment, the recruiting, and all this because of NIL, and that he had a kid in a transfer portal situation that he was committed to them privately. I'm coming. Everything was done. There was no questions about it. And then all of a sudden he gets that dreaded phone call. Coach, how much am I getting in NIL?
Yeah.
Yep. And then all of a sudden the kid's going somewhere else.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, Rodney, look, it's gotten to be that's exactly what it's not supposed to be. And then the nonstop texting and social media that you have to do with these kids, I think that's helping make it even more difficult. But again, it's already tough enough and there's enough pressure as is. But then when you got the kids coming in and playing you off of another school saying, hey, this school's offering me this, I want to stay here, but okay. Hey, we'll come back for just a couple of more minutes. We'll let Rodney go after this, but I want to come back after the break. Make sure you let people know how they can keep up with you and your great magazine, Tider Insider. Rob Browne, Rodney Orr on this beautiful Saturday, May 13th, 2023, right after this. All right, Rodney, got an idea that we get rid of NIL. I've said do age-banded trust and incentive-based trust, but even better, you could do a profit sharing or revenue sharing type of deal where, okay, how much money does the football program bring in at the end of the fiscal year? You know, you have your people in the controller in the accounting office. Okay, football made this much, okay? And then I'm not saying you divide all of that up. You just have a portion of it. And from that, you pay all the players. You pay everybody. Okay. Either because it's going toward, we're going to make the players employees of the university. And then can they get tenure? I mean, come on. There's so many college administrators that are making a lot of money. And if you ask them to give you a job description, they probably couldn't do it. But something's got to break, and the free market will force this to happen. And that's why people are just grabbing it while they can. The Congress getting involved. I mean, seriously, how do you take an oath to Congress and be held to any high standard and be accused of perjuring yourself when they lie to the American people every time they open their mouths? I mean, when it comes to budgets and, spending and all that kind of stuff. So something's got to give, but do you like my idea of the profit sharing plan? That way, but then in order to do that, Rodney, here's some incentives I'm going to throw in. You got to be academically on schedule to graduate. You got to be doing things the right way. And if you're not, you don't get to get paid. It's like that. They want to be treated like, big stars. Welcome to the real world, Rodney. Wouldn't you agree? And then I'll let you close out with Tider Insider information. But are you in favor of that?
Well, Rob, listen, you're the financial expert. You know how to work these things out. I'm not. I don't know what the pros and cons of that idea might be. I mean, I heard some of what you were saying, and I think it sounds good. But I mean, again, I don't really, haven't thought about it, and you would know a lot more about it than I would. But Alabama, I know that they have an NIL program that does pay all the players. I'm talking about even the ones that don't play. That there's an NIL program in place that does make sure every player gets something. Yeah. As far as the profit sharing you're talking about, right, who knows what direction this thing's going to take. Yeah. I mean, I would have never dreamed we would be where we are, Yeah.
I totally agree. All right, look, Rodney, thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday. You are a saint for doing this, being on with us, but let people know how they can follow you, and look forward to having you back on Tuesday morning, the May Veterinary Clinic Tide Report on Tuesday in the fourth segment.
Well, it's TiderInsider.com. If you're an Alabama fan, it's only $48 a year. You can get instant access with your credit card if you prefer. There is an address there to send a check, and that gives you all our premium information. We had some football notes this week that were really, I think, something your Alabama listeners would like to see. And but our all sports forums are community of Alabama fans. I mean, Rob, discussion among the fans, and I'm not talking about a bunch of kids on there. I'm talking about there's a lot of really good information there that is shared on our community of Alabama fans, the All Sports Forum, TiderInsider.com.
All right, Rodney, look, always, again, great stuff, and have a great rest of your weekend. Thanks so much.
Okay, Rob, appreciate it.
You bet. All right, let's head back out now to Las Vegas and see what we got here. Mr. Papa Christou out there in what casino are you at? Is that the Bellagio? Is that I don't see Don Rickles in the background and Robert De Niro.
I'm actually here at the Mirage. We went old school. Ron and I did one of our first trips out here when we first started going out back in like the mid 90s. I said, it'd be fun just to kind of go back to Mirage. What we didn't know is it's about to be taken over by the Hard Rock literally in a matter of weeks. We had no clue. So when we came out here, they're actually going to be transferring it over control to the Hard Rock. But it was just fun. We've got a cabana out by the pool a little bit later. I've been here in the sports book. I'll show it to you. Turn it around. Here this morning, working on my horse bets already, but enjoying life, buddy. How you been?
Good. You look like you had a lot of fun at the Kentucky Derby. I took Angel of Empire. I got third place. They're not going to send him to the glue factory, are they?
No, absolutely not. And you know what the cool thing is when we bet Angel of Empire, we doubled our money on our show bet, which is almost unheard of for a horse that was one of the co-favorites. At 4-1, on a show bet, you're only supposed to maybe get $2.80 back on a $2 bet. It was $4.10, and that's the power of the pool bets. When you're talking about all the bets that are at like a place like Churchill Downs and all the other sports books that allow you to bet on them during the day, the pool bet is what really jacks up that money. It's all that casual cash that comes in from novices just picking horses that they like the color or they like the number. Of course, the only guy in our group that actually had Mage was because his daughter liked the name and liked the pink saddlecloth. And you know what? They don't. What's the old saying? They don't ask you how; they ask you how many. In golf. Well, that's the same thing. It didn't matter. He cashed the ticket, and none of us had Mage. By the way, if you looked at the racing forum, ain't nobody was going to pick that horse. Had three really pedestrian outings, but yet came in, and that's what horse racing is. I was joking with Rhonda earlier today. We were talking about it. I had read a wonderful article. Tim Layden wrote it in NBC, and they do most of the coverage of the horses now. And it was about an old writer. In fact, I see Buddy's on with us. He might know Bill Mack, the old writer from New York, which is a fabulous writer. But the one thing that you learn about, looking at the racing forums is, it tells you what happened in the previous races. It does not tell you what's going to happen in the race that's about to come up. Again, we joke, Rob, you being a financial advisor and me being an investor, past performances are not indicative of future results.
That's right.
And that showed at the Derby.
Buddy Martin's on here with us right now from a place where they know a thing or two about horses, Ocala, Florida. And Buddy, Frank is at you're where right now? The Bellagio?
The Mirage Sports Book here in the lovely Las Vegas Strip.
Okay, we're at the Martin Bookie Casino here in Ocala right now, you see. And I know Frank is like, what was that game? Where in the world is, what was that? Carmen Sandiego. This Where in the World is Frank Duffy. He's among the elite and the rich at the big time. Because aren't they serving you free drinks there already? I mean, come on, man.
Hang on a second. I think
Bloody Mary.
I think I just got one.
Yeah, I think he did. Yeah. So
thankfully, it's just orange juice.
I say I want to come back as Frank. Listen, I didn't have the winner because my horse got scratched, and then I went sort of picked it random. But my good friends, the Grinders and O'Farrell's, O'Farrell family and the Grinders are connected at Ocala, train Forte, and they've done had great success. Ocala's had 6 Kentucky Derby winners. But I always love the race, no matter if I win or lose. In this case, I didn't win, but I knew Bill Knack pretty well. He was at Newsday when I knew him, and then he went to Sports Illustrated. Tremendous boxing writer, and also horse racing is well known for it too. And Andrew Beyer, I used to cover horse racing, and I hate to go back in the day and all that sort of stuff, but that was part of the deal. And as I said to you guys before, I was blessed to cover, back in the glory days, the Secretariat, all three of those races. And then of course Sunday Silence was my second favorite horse because he made me money on both the first two races, the Derby and Preakness, and he didn't get there in the Belmont, and I knew he wouldn't, but I had to bet a bob on him because he was so good to me. But there's there are so many great stories in horse racing. I mean, the back stretch and going and having breakfast at Churchill Downs in the back stretch where all the workers were
at Wagner's Pharmacy. We went there for breakfast the other day.
Yeah. And so back then when I started going, it wasn't called that, but nonetheless, it's a wonderful sport, and it's a shame that more people don't know about it. NBC does a good job, but quite frankly, they only care about it one day a year, pretty much in most places.
Right. Yeah, you can go to Valley Sports, can't you, or Fox? There was a bunch of stuff about the Arkansas Derby leading up to that, and so there's good coverage. But
it's not a big three sport. I mean, let's be honest about it. It's like other sports, and Valley does a good job, but we get a lot of coverage in the Florida Derby here. Of course, is a prep race, all those prep races, and there's so many good stories and so much beauty. But there's also a lot about the working people, the backstories, the hard times, what have you. And you're right, Frank. It's that's a good place to enjoy it right there. I'm waiting for my invitation and my private plane to show up here, Frank.
Come on, buddy, man. We'd love to have you. Hey, and you're right, buddy. That, talking about the big three, you had boxing, you had baseball, and you had horse racing, which were the big three sports of the turn, the middle of the 20th century. And the writers did such a wonderful job of explaining those sports. And I mean, they were the heroes, the Seabiscuits, the Citations, the Man of Wars, the Secretariats. They were mythical figures. And that's what this article that I read on NBC.com they recently wrote about, was how Secretariat has lived on in the lore of in fact of the five people that they talked about who have propelled that lore of Secretariat was Ronnie Turcotte, who was the jockey, tragically
later injured.
Yep, paraplegic. 5 years later.
Yeah.
But that's the type of horses and that industry. It really does live in lore. It's present day, but really the history, the traditions, the heroes. That is one of those sports that carries that with it, and it was in the writing of the great sports writers of the day.
That's where it is. We just lost another one a couple of weeks ago, John Underwood, who was one of the great writers of Sports Illustrated, Miami Herald. Ted Williams should have come here every spring to Ocala, and because the farm clubs, the White Sox, were here, and Ted played golf and did all the stuff. And John Underwood showed up a lot because he was writing a book on hitting with Ted Williams, and John worked for Sports Illustrated. And John was a wonderful writer and told many great stories, and he passed last couple of weeks ago. And we're losing them right and left, and it's amazing. But you're right. If you want to go back in history and live it again, the great writers are the ones who bring it to you. And there's some good ones. There's some great ones. I can give you a whole list one day. But I know Rob has is new school with old school heart, and he knows all those great writers. And guys, on Saturdays in the press box and the SEC, you talk about some writing power. There were some people there that just were the stories they told, and the way they told them, and the words they used. Amazing. I'm afraid we're losing a lot of that.
Yeah. And buddy, don't forget the great photographers too.
Yeah.
That was one of the people that was talked about in this article was the great photographer, Italian name. I can't pronounce it. I would butcher it and not do it justice, but he was the track photographer for Belmont, and he just showed up and did his job, every day for 30 years. And he just happened to climb up went across the track and climbed up on one of the stands for Secretariat's race for the Belmont, and had already pre-focused his camera for the shot for when Secretariat was about to cross the finish line. And when he pivoted his shot, he wound up getting the other horses that were so far behind. And it's that iconic shot that really shows you how far 31 lengths is for when Secretariat was crossing the finish line. And then in the background is that long, baton death march of a stretch of Belmont that lasted forever. But it was almost gauzed over because it was out of focus. And so it almost gave a mystical, sort of magical look to it. The stands and all the people that were there to watch history. There was only 69,000 people at Belmont that day, but I'll guarantee you, like many of the great football games over time, there's 500,000 that claim.
Well,
that
this one was here. I
great.
was there, and I have the articles to prove it. And I remember that moment. It's almost like in slow motion in your mind. Of all the things I've seen many things. I was aghast at the way he dominated that race. And poor Sham. Oh my gosh. And
what a hard luck horse, man.
He
just picked the wrong year to be born.
Absolutely, he did.
He would have been a Triple Crown winner, I think.
Maybe he was second in every race. I think might have been third in one, but it was tried so hard. But back to your subject, Rob. I didn't mean to take over. We didn't mean to take over the show, but you like old school stuff, and I think it's important, as Frank points out, to really get context. And you only get context. You can go back and read what was going on then, because you know you can understand it now. And what was going on was that was just one of those things. We'll never see anything like that again.
Yeah.
And you knew it when you're watching it, that you were watching something that would be forevermore stand the test of time.
And buddy, we needed it because we had just gotten out of Watergate and Vietnam. We absolutely needed a hero. We needed a champion. Something a sports champion to believe in, and we got that with Secretary.
No
the
question.
Greatest horse that I've ever witnessed. In videos and footage.
There was an amazing period of time. And by the way, you mentioned two things that drove me out of sports, things that were so devastating in our world, that I really left sports and went over to the feature section of the St. Pete Times and got away from it and went back and went to the Daily News. But the bottom line is that, we need heroes. I was blessed to cover Hank Aaron's home run race. That went over 2 seasons, see Secretariat during that time, covered the Dolphins undefeated season. So it was remarkable. It really was. I thank you for bringing that up. Somebody wrote me, I heard John Meacham say this for the weekend when he writes, thank you, but as something said, good old days, right, but a lot of times I just type. I bet Buddy knows who that is. I don't. I mean, look, the Red Smith said it right, and I hate to talk about how great the old days were, because these days have some things to offer too. About writing, it is so hard. And today, when I write, like I wrote my column on Saturday, Rob, I sent it to you on Thursday.
Hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break. Don't ever apologize for greatness, because you shrinking to make other people feel less uncomfortable is a disservice to us all.
Right.
Feel free to speak freely. This is a First Amendment show, ardently protected always. We'll be right back with some legends. Buddy Martin, the most interesting man in the world, along with Franz Beard, Frank Duffy.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House Equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Yeah, back here with Frank Duffy and Buddy Martin. And Buddy, you were waxing eloquently, poetically.
Thank you. And I just want to say how much I appreciate Frank, because he know to look this stuff up and be aware of it and to know about the context of it. And it's not just that the old days were better, folks. It's that there were certain people, mostly all men. Unfortunately, there were a few women. Like the great Red Smith once said, all you got, how hard is it to write? Well, it's easy. All you got to do is open up a vein and let it bleed. And I love his comments. And so one day they asked him, Red, how long does it take you to write a column? He said, well, 45 years to write it and 2 hours to type it.
That's beautiful.
And so the context of these, and I was so blessed to sit in the press box to get to know these people and be around them. By osmosis, I'd learned something. The great ones, the affirmative Bishers, and many, I can name 100 of them right now. And Red Smith, except Jimmy Cannon was one of my favorites. So getting that is so, I lay in bed at nights, I wake up at 5 a.m. I sit there and I think about how can I put this in context? Maybe I should write a book about the life of a newspaper vagabond, the things I've seen and heard. Well, nobody cares about all that, but we got to get it down somewhere, because the days of artificial intelligence are taking over. I'm telling you, it's scary that I can type in 4 or 5 names and that's a question, and they can give me a story about that, and they made up part of it, but who would know? And once that gets in the DNA of Google, who knows where we're going to go? So the purity, Frank, of those stories and those great writers you're talking about, it's like the Renaissance time. It's like the painters. They painted these pictures and they're there. Yeah. And we should learn to treasure them, read them, write books about them, let people read them, I think. So anyway.
Buddy, I would tell you, I would dare to say AI, they can tinker with AI all they want. It will never have the ethos or the pathos that a good sports writer or a good writer would have. Ever.
Wow, you need to write that down, Frank. That's awesome.
Yeah,
write it down. Say it again, Frank. Right? Say it again. So
they could tinker with AI all they want. It would never have the ethos and pathos that exudes from a writer's fingertips. Would never have it.
Yeah. You got to put that down someplace, Rob.
Well, I will, and I'll say this too: as the son of an architect, you can use CAD drawings all you want, but there's nothing like an actual architect
freehand.
Think about the great palaces, the Leaning Tower of Pisa. No engineer in today's world would ever approve that. No building inspector with a white polyester short sleeve shirt and a clip-on tie and thick black glasses would ever approve of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It's too much danger. The Sistine Chapel. Nobody would allow.
Or the streets of Venice.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. The inspector would not allow it. The bottom line is that you've got to have a lot of artistic license. And there is a little bit of embellishment. Sure, there is. But as Ben Troop always likes to, passively say, we all get better and bigger and faster with time. But the reason why the history, the traditions, and the heroes, the great writers, the great moments is because we weren't worrying. Everybody wasn't walking around on eggshells worrying about offending somebody. Hey, there's life. That is just the way it is. You're going to get your feelings hurt sometimes. But you know what? When you get your feelings hurt, you'll think about stuff. What am I doing? And we're doing a disservice if a writer is afraid to tell the truth. We need columnists. We need bloggers. We need the days of Mike Royko writing his columns. I mean, I keep thinking in the background, buddy, where Frank is, I'm going to see Don Rickles and Robert De Niro in the background going, Mr. Duffy, what are you doing? What are you doing? Or we're going to see those guys from Hangover walking around.
Or Dan Jenkins.
Yes,
hey, man. Hey, speaking of great writers, Damon Runyon, there's a few of those characters walking around this place.
Yeah. A lot of Damon Runyon types. I want to go back to something you said. You said about embellishment and writing. We like to think of that as enhancement. Okay. Yeah. Now you got to remember the way people write purposely sometimes is for to get the impact of exaggeration. Let me give an example. The great Jim Murray. Okay. I never saw Tom Harmon play, but he did. And when Tom Harmon died, the great Jim Murray wrote, Tom Harmon died yesterday, period. If he had a football under his arm, God would never have caught him. I mean,
that's cool.
Does that work? I think it does, right?
That's beautiful.
Now, so there's that tool in the writer's box to write that way. And when you talk about lore, now you're talking about lore. That's something that AI would never have either. So that was so. And by the way, certain sports, like I've fallen back in love with baseball. I watch a lot lately.
Yeah,
that me too.
All the analytics stuff, that's great, love it. But boy, I tell you, you can measure things that have greatness in baseball 100 years ago or 50 years ago, whatever. So there's certain sports that lend themselves. Horse racing does, in a way, boxing does. But you're right. It can only be captured like by the renaissance of the writers. Back in the day when the great ones had a way of putting it down in black and white, and you understood it, appreciated it, and it educated you. And like somebody said the other day, we all beat the door down on Thursdays to get a copy of Sports Illustrated in our mail bag on Thursdays.
Yep.
But as somebody said too, the reason it's not there as important is you can't get you don't care about Patrick Mahomes' stats from a week ago anymore like he used to in those days.
Hey, buddy, I was sitting in this sports book 2 days ago. I had the other side in a bet. I lost the bet. I had the White Sox against Kansas City. Kansas City pushed across a safety squeeze in the bottom of the ninth to win the ball game, not have it go into extra innings.
Yeah.
And there is something that you cannot put in a box score. It has to be relayed. And if you don't see it with your own eyes, like I saw it on this big screen, ripping up my ticket, I would have had to have a writer that was there at that game, sitting at a typewriter or at a computer, at a laptop, in that press box to tell me the nuance of how that was the perfect bunt laid down, and that he could have skipped home on a jump rope. He could have made it home. The bunt was that perfect.
Yeah, no
and
doubt.
Those are the nuances that you can't get from AI, and you can't get it from a box score.
No.
You've got to have a human tell you what you saw if you didn't see it yourself.
Well said. And I know Rob could tell some stories. You can talk about Bo Jackson all you want to, but unless you saw him play and what he could do, a physical freak that he was, a speed, power, unbelievable skills, eye hand. I'm sure I read about many stories back in the day when he played baseball. They talked about he hit home runs that were immeasurable at all.
The sound. They
couldn't even tell how far they went, And so the only way you could know it was somebody was there and said, "Hey, that ball went over the water tower," or whatever it did, So, so those are the things, and Southern sports lend themselves to that. So some of it's apocryphal, and the lore is acceptable, but it's not fabrication.
Yeah. Well, I remember being in Europe in the summer of 1986 at a train station in Munich, picking up a copy of USA Today, and there was a picture in there. He was playing for the Memphis Chicks, AA team in Memphis that Avron Fogelman owned,
Love that name.
along with Kaufman Ewing, owned the Royals. And they said Bo hit a home run that went 571 feet. And the way the writer wrote it, I remember George Lapidus. I remember him very well. For the
George was a good friend of mine, by the way.
Yeah, and he passed away about 6 years ago. And he was just I model so much. I think about when he did his sports radio show, as my friend Jeff Woods, a photographer down at Channel 3 in Memphis. George came there and was their sports director for a while. He said, no one in the world has a Rolodex like George Lapidus.
Yeah, great one.
And he wrote this story in the Memphis Press Scimitar, August of 1982. And the headline was, "Oh, Bo, Auburn claims a Herschel clone." He goes, "As I sat for dinner last night with second-year Auburn coach Pat Dye and his wife Sue,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't help but notice the childlike grin in Pat Dye's face as he talked about a freshman they called Vincent. Some people called him Bo Jackson. He talked about it. But you just go back to those great writers. And I'm going to tell you, buddy.
Well, first of all, just saying I was sat with dinner last night with the coach. That's something that's never going to happen again.
Yeah, exactly. But I remember when Coach Bryant won his 315th game, I got to work with David Housel and Buddy Davidson in high school. They let me work up in the press box. Well, Auburn was the home team for that game for 315. I was a senior in high school, and I'm up there in the press box. At halftime, I'm in the buffet line. I'm you wouldn't believe me. There's there's all the dignitaries and the people that are so famous. Gil Brandt is right next to me, and he got the mashed potatoes and the hamburger steak. I remember that with gravy, and I'm like, that's Gil Brandt. Wow. And all these people. So after the game, we're sitting up there in the press box with George Lapidus is sitting there and all these writers, and my parents are up there with me, and I'm listening to the post-game radio comments but actually what they give to the press. And you know how that works, Buddy and Frank. Mm-hmm. And Coach Dye said, well, let me first of all say congratulations to that man across the way in that other locker room. He goes, I love him like a father. He's meant a lot to me, and nobody deserves that more than he does. But let me say this to all the Auburn folks listening. He said, as soon as we start getting our share of the players and playing out of the same deck of cards as Alabama and Georgia and Florida and Tennessee, we're going to win championships too. And he went on and made some more comments, and he said, we're going to get on that bus and head back down to Auburn. We're getting to work tomorrow morning. Mm-hmm. We ain't got any time to waste. You think about the great writers. and I tell you, I can't get it out of my just to see a Jack Hairston of the Gainesville Sun, mm-hmm. to see Furman Bisher arguing with David Housel about should Jim Bob Harris of Athens, Georgia, who was an All-American at Alabama, be first-team preseason All-American, or Bob Harris from Southwest DeKalb in Decatur, Georgia, at Auburn, be first-team All-American. And Housel told Furman Bisher, he said, let me tell you something, Furman. You know damn well if Bob Harris was wearing a damn crimson jersey, he'd be first-team All-American, and you wouldn't even know who he was. He goes, we got to change that narrative. But those kinds of engagements, and to be in the presence of someone like Furman Bisher wearing an Argyle sweater, buddy, never, ever should we apologize. The first time I went to the Vatican, the Sistine Chapel, and you see these things, artificial intelligence can't make that stuff up. Michelangelo was 37 years old, laying on his back when he finished the frescoes in the Sistine Chapel. I mean, without writers, writers are like artists. Without writers, we have a dumb culture. I'm just going to say that for the record.
Illiterate.
Well, that's why I appreciate Frank so much. And so we're on the subject, and I'll just throw this line out there for now, which is to say, Kevin Grabinski put a tweet on day before yesterday saying, Tommy Tuberville piece he wrote, which is who can we trust with the future of college football with all the stuff like NIL, et cetera, whatever. And this guy wrote great question. And it just happens to coincide a little bit with what I tried to say in my column Thursday, which basically is there going to come a time when the core values come back to play. And the question I raised was basically about, look, we talk about it on this show all the time. I wrote, am I a fool to think that one day old-fashioned team work ethics and those concepts will reward those who mix it in with their artificial intelligence and analytical genius? And so that's the question on the floor. Is that, will this pay dividends? When will being old school and dedicated to the right things? And I'm not saying we're not going to change. We have already changed. We can't go back there. Can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah.
But if you can combine and mix those concepts, Frank, that the commitments to hard work and perseverance and the plan and commitment and loyalty and all the good things about team culture and wait long enough, it ought to pay off. That's where I can bring in Billy Napier. Yeah. If it does pay off and he can survive, this could be a long time thing because he's a good man. He made some progress in the last couple of days, I think. On number one, he followed me on Twitter. That's one thing. But secondly, the point is that he said things around the state because he's on his tours and whatever. And he stood up for his quarterback, which I love. I said, "Give me something, Billy. Give me something."
Yeah.
He wrote down. He said, "How many other quarterbacks started 32 games?" Graham Mertz did. That's a pretty good question. So now I can say, all right, let me just hang my hat on that because what I've seen so far, I don't know how to judge that. But now when you look at those core values, there's a reason he chose Graham Mertz. Why he's probably going to be the quarterback. Why is that? Is it old school values? His dad was a great one. His dad was a great high school coach and taught him about work and taught him about doing the right thing and taught him about and by the way, just while we're talking about Napier, you don't read a lot of stories about his players going to jail for something they did wrong. Okay, he's the character does count at some point. Yeah. So that's why I was trying to parlay this and Frank into what you're saying about old time values and saying today, is there room for both, guys? Is there room for both? And how patient will the fan bases be?
Well, and think about this, buddy. I mean, how many times have you watched games? I don't care, pick the sport. How many times do you watch games and you say to yourself, where's the fundamentals? Why are they doing that? You know, I scratch my head. I watch some of the Braves games and some of the Braves players like, I wouldn't have even done that in Little League. I mean, you learn that in like the first or second day.
Hit the friggin' cutoff man for crying out loud. You know,
yeah,
things like that.
Well, get one strike when you're down and you need multiple base runners.
Take two and hit the right. Whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, so you try to think of, yes, you know, yeah, there's change that's in everything. However, the fundamentals work because they worked. You know, it was smart to you know, play a game a certain way or to create a team a certain way where team came before the individual. I'm so sick of some of this individual stuff. I can't see straight. I mean, so no, you're exactly right. And let me tell you something right now, buddy. Bringing up Florida as an apt example. You guys are at a pivotal crossroads this year. It is a huge year for Florida football.
Hold those thoughts, Frank. Yeah,
you're at a crossroads.
Tell me more,
you're
Frank,
right.
after the break.
Yeah, we're gonna do it because I totally agree with where you're going with this. Right back, Frank Duffy, Buddy Martin, Rob Browne after this. Hey, when you're out and about today, head over to Wynn, Arkansas, Red River Ford Toyota. They are open 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Service department open on Saturday mornings, 7:30 to 12:30. After the tornado, not hurricane, the tornado, March 31st in Wynn, they've received a lot of extra inventory, Fords and Toyotas, cars, trucks, SUVs, and over 700 previously owned cars, trucks, and SUVs. But get over to RedRiverFordToyota.com. They will deliver anywhere. And I tell you what, guys, we have a very sarcastic, dismissive society. I mean, there is such a wave of a narrative out there of when you try to talk about old-fashioned values, core, team building, hard work. People say, oh, you'll never get it back. Yeah, you will. I'll tell you the reason why the kids act the way they act today is because a bunch of sorry-ass parents let them do it. That's just the way it is. You allow your children to write the narrative. And if your household goes on the mood of your kids, that's your fault. You know, there's a sticker on my freezer. I remember when my kids were young, I don't need your attitude. I've got my own. Okay. I asked what's for dinner. My dad always says, boy, whatever your mother's making, and you're going to like it. I mean, he goes, that's right. I asked, what's mom making for dinner? He goes, hell, I have no idea, but I'm eating it. The dad runs the show, and the mom, if you don't have a mom, if it's just the mom, she runs the show. But we've got way too, and this is my kids telling me this. Hallie Wilson, Max Mallory, they'll say, it ain't the kids today that are the problem. It's the parents trying to be best friends with their kids. Buddy, don't ever back down. Absolutely. Having you on is so important to this show, what we are. And it's just we're blessed. I can just say this.
Well, thank you very
Frank,
much.
Don't ever back down. When Franz is on.
Frank, I want to say, we interrupted Billy Graham's preaching when we interrupted Frank, okay? Frank was preaching. He was bringing the message now. We interrupted him.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get that momentum back. Dr. Duffy, Dr. Duffy, can you pick it up?
Frank in Las Vegas.
Well, I am curious, buddy, what you see for Florida coming into this season, because I think it's a crossroads season for y'all. You know, Billy Napier, I think, is building something really good there. I really do. You know, he kind of had his, you know, it was a tough start because of what was left him. I mean, Dan Mullen left a mess, in my opinion. So I think Billy Napier needs at least 3 seasons there to see what he can do. But I think this year, coming off of Anthony Richardson leaving, I think now is the time that y'all have got to get some play, not only out of a quarterback, but get back to Florida football, which is driving the ball on the ground, you know, getting that big line play, the Pouncey brothers. I mean, just, you know, that's what Florida football, it really me. Yes, it was the fun and gun. Yes, it was Spurrier throwing it all over the place, but also it was controlling the ball in the fourth quarter in the swamp, where it was really tough to, if you didn't have a lead in the fourth quarter, you wasn't going to get a lead in the swamp. And that's what they need to get back to.
That's a good point. And by the way, Rob, before I forget about it, I really appreciated your text on the show Thursday night. Rob texted me in the middle of it. We're here at the Cherry Farm, got our feet propped up and watching Orange and Blue Bloods with Ben and myself and friends and Lauren. Appreciate that comment very much. Now, I had the picture of you being by that fire, sitting there, you know, having a cold one in your hand and watching. I appreciate you doing that. Frank, you're right. And, beg your pardon? Yes.
And a Ham's beer.
And a Ham's beer, yeah. Thank you very much. And Frank, you're right. The one you just mentioned, 2 eras there. And by the way, I'd given you guys some homework a couple weeks ago to tell me who are the great tandems, 2 coaches at each SEC school of all time. It gets a little sticky when I tell you you can't use them but one place. So if you want to use, obviously you have to use Nick at Alabama. You can't use him at LSU. But anyway, the point is that the eras you just mentioned, the Pounceys, Urban, of course, Spurrier, but Spurrier ran the football in the second half. I've talked to him all the time.
Sure did.
And he would get 4 touchdowns up on you and just make you eat it. You know, hand the ball off the second half. So, those are great. And it's really frustrating. And when Spurrier was on Feinbaum a couple of months ago, he asked me about Florida. He said, right now, we're just being humble down here. You know, because that's what it is. That's how you have, everybody's got to go through it. So I found myself being a little non-committal and perhaps, I don't want to say critical, because I don't criticize him, I really like him. But when you had a Dan Mullen, you think, yes, he's the guy. He comes from Urban. He knows how to run the offense. Their offense has been bad for years. And he goes out of the box and you say, yeah, this is our guy. Even Spurrier bought in. Everybody bought in. And next thing you know, I mean, I don't know how else to say it. He pretty much quit on the team after he lost to Alabama. That was it. The players quit. So now you think, all right, who's the next one going to be? And you get this guy, Billy Napier, we don't know much about, except my friends in Louisiana know about him.
Yeah.
And we know his record at Louisiana. But look, Louisiana ain't Florida. However, let me point out, Urban came from Utah, who, by the way, I don't think was even a Power 5 school then. And Spurrier came from Duke, who was a Power 5, but also the doormat of the ACC.
Sure.
So they didn't come in there exactly as Bear Bryant. And now you got a guy coming from Louisiana. The question is, I wrote this column. He's got all the toolbox. He has everything he needs now. Recruiting's getting better. They got a big month coming up in June. 2024 is their year. That's their year they're pointing for. But it falls under the curse of the old Florida motto from 50 years ago, wait till next year. Yeah. And Spurrier came along and taught us out, you ain't got to wait till next year. You can do it this year. So that's the dilemma we're in right now. But every school is cyclical. Look at Auburn, who, by the way, at this point in time, is one of my dark horses. I like what's happening. You freeze, we're going to get that thing going. So it's going to be a fascinating year to figure out. You guys have seen all the projections, the over/under. Florida's picked for only 5.5 wins by DraftKings. I don't know. But if they can get through this transitional year, Frank, you're right, and get it back to where it needs to be for 2024, there's a new day ahead for Gators.
Yeah. And, the toughest thing about it is the fans seeing through that, and everyone thinks they know everything. Yeah. And it takes time. Like you say, nobody wants to slow cook, but if you've ever cooked a brisket, you got to go about an hour for every pound. If you rush it, it's going to taste like crap. I mean, and it's not really brisket. But I think we're going in football is, and Frank alluded to it earlier, is about the narcissism that's so prevalent on a lot of teams. The me. Okay, look, players that are willing to stick around and be developed, those are the ones that are going to do well in life. These kids that are transferring, they graduate high school in December, come into college in January, go through spring practice, and at the end of spring practice, if they're not where they want to be on the depth chart, they leave. They're gonna quit everything tough in life, okay? Because the first time you quit, you know the deal. It's kind of hard. But the second time and beyond,
it's easier.
It's a little easier. And the third time and beyond, you don't even think about it. What happens is you are not even trying. You're coming up with excuses. And I think
look at that kid Blaylock, the receiver that was at Georgia and Alabama.
Yeah.
And I think he's on his 4th or 5th school now. It's
Billy said an important thing about the transfer portal this week, which is another thing he said. He said this off the beaten path on these skater clubs that you're not allowed to report on, but they eventually get the word out. And he made it a point. He told my friend Keith Niebuhr from On 3 down in Tampa, he meets with these groups before media before he goes on. It's very important. He says you have to understand when you go into the transfer portal, if you don't do your diligence, you'll get burned and you'll waste time because you spend all this time recruiting a guy who can't get in Florida. And by the way, there are standards, pretty good ones there. You can't get in. You've recruited him for 6 months and you waste all the time because he flunked the academics. And then you recruit a guy and found out he's injured and can't pass the physical. So how you spend your time in the portal is important.
Sure.
And that's part of it. But I mean, it's confusing. But let me say this too. On the flip side of what we're saying here, Frank, there was a day long ago when Bear Bryant signed 100 people.
Yeah.
Just to keep him from going to Auburn or any place.
Put him in a cupboard. Yeah.
That ain't fair either. That ain't fair. So I get that.
Yeah. Well, that's where we're going. That's why if you don't understand the history of football and sports about holding players and just warehousing them to keep them from playing for your competitors, you don't understand what the portal is just as a coach, you're going, God, if I push these kids too hard, am I going to be at dinner tonight, look on the crawl at the bottom of ESPN and see 3 of my guys have gone into the quitter portal? I mean, look, it's the new
what about the coach taking a new contract and leaving? I mean, that works.
I understand that, but for 18 and 19-year-olds, though, I mean, they're 18 and 19, and we're trying to grow these kids up too early, and that's why they're falling flat on their face. The maturation process for everybody is different. And, there's nothing uglier than a half-finished painting. That's true. And there's nothing more really confusing than an underdeveloped 19-year-old who hadn't even begun to experience what he can be, but he doesn't give any chance long enough to develop it. He bounces around like a mosquito, just going from arm to arm to suck whatever blood or NIL money he can get. And until they put some teeth And these contracts with NIL, I mean, Frank, you talked about your 3 friends in Louisiana that did NIL deals, and all 3 of those kids had quit the team. Look,
correct.
I'm not PC. I'm not woke. I'm not any of that. I tell it like it is. I do it for a living. I have to. Listen, that term opt-out is like curbside pickup. Get out of your car and go inside and pick up your food or go to the drive-thru. But 90% of the parking lot at most restaurants now is for some little special deal. Get out of here. Look,
dude, they don't even do that. They just get Uber Eats to bring it to them. It's it's crazy. It's all honey, we're going in and we're going to sit down and eat.
Yeah. Oh my God. You know, you go. Yeah. But
wait. You can't. You don't order Uber Eats in New Orleans?
No.
No,
they don't give you Uber Eats in Antoine's or whatever. No, okay, I didn't. Just want to check.
Galatoire's, Commander's Palace. They do not.
It's just hey. Galatoire's, it wouldn't be the same if I did it on takeout. You got to be there for the 3 hours for that long Parisian style lunch, man.
Yes.
Hey, and look, the food just tastes better depending on who you see sitting next to you.
Yeah, that is true. But you know, the important thing about it is, you look at so much of what we see on television. You know, guys, we had yesterday really interesting. We had a guest on who covers Oklahoma, from out in Oklahoma City and Norman. Tyler McComas does a 4-hour sports show every day, 2 to 6 p.m. He is so excited, Oklahoma fans are, about coming to the SEC. He said the Chamber of Commerce in Norman, Oklahoma has sent people out to Lexington, KY, Fayetteville, Tuscaloosa, and they said, okay, here's an example of why this is important. We play West Virginia. They may bring 200 people. Texas Tech, 173. You know, they don't travel out here. He said, we play Auburn. They're bringing 6,000 or 8,000 plus all the people that come without tickets that are just going to try to buy a ticket. He said the economic impact of a typical home game for OU in Norman right now is about $11 million. So we went to Tuscaloosa and these other places. It's 3 times that at least.
Yeah.
So guys, we got something special. And if it weren't for the great writers, the Buddy Martins, you know, Tony Barnhart's another great one. And I see so many great people, you know, out there, Franz Beard, you and Buddy, all y'all, we wouldn't know about all the past. And it's like this. You can't have a 250-foot tall redwood or sequoia tree if it doesn't have the 150, 200 feet below it. You don't just look at the top of it. It's got roots. And that's what's college football. We've got roots that go deep underground too. And you got to respect that. And we've got way too many silly, sardonic, dismissive people out there in the media. And frankly, I wish they would put their lips over their heads and swallow.
By the way, you mentioned that. Yes, that's an ugly sight right there. But you mentioned that back in the day, I knew all about New Orleans when I was a young sports writer, because Florida played out there twice every year, either Tulane or LSU.
Yeah.
And if Auburn wasn't, on your schedule, you wouldn't know about Toomer's Corner, all the. And by the way, I didn't go to the Grove until like 1990. What was that? About the year 2000. That's the first time I went to the Grove. I put it in my book. So 95. So I went to the Grove the first time. I've been to Oxford, but never been to the Grove. If you haven't been there, you just don't know what SEC football is about, right? So, so all those things are important. And where do you get that information? You learn it as you're reading the great writers. Speaking of which, Rob, I'm a little ticked off at you because I look behind you. I see all these books up there on your shelf.
Yeah.
And I don't see the one that's on my top right-hand side of my screen here, which is Coach Steve Spurrier, head ball coach. I don't see that up there. So I don't know what's going on with it.
Well, we're building a set. We've got a marketing director in a firm that we've hired that around SEC Media Days, we're going to have a new set, but I'm going to get more of the books up there. But there's Saturday.
I'm sending Brendan Martin to SEC Media Days. You're going to coach him up a little bit. All right.
Hey, listen, hey, Frank, this is Buddy's son. This is Cecil B. DeMille's, man. This dude is a producer of extraordinary talent. This is
awesome.
You got to watch the Buddy Martin show, folks. And let me say this: we're about out of time. And folks, we are blessed in so many ways. That means we can also go out and bless others. Just go out and help people, make a positive difference. Don't allow negative thoughts to get inside your brain. Junk in, junk out, and positive out. Pretty simple. Put God first in everything you do. Try to do that every day. Buddy, tell people how they can follow you. And Frank, there he is. There's Don Rickles right there in the corner. But anyway, buddy, tell people how they can follow you. And again, thank you, and Frank, and to Rodney Orr before you, so much for taking time out of your Saturday to share it with us, because it means the world to us and our listeners and our viewers.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Rob, for what you're doing. I always enjoy being on with Frank. And I want to remind you to your mama this weekend. Pay attention to your mama. Maybe it's a memory, as is the case for me with Margaret Martin O'Quinn. Margaret O'Quinn Martin, and maybe it's someone that's in the other room. It's just like my wife Joni of all these years. So pay attention to your mothers, your wives, the women that really run the world and keep us straight. So you can hear us on Monday through Thursday, 9:00, with our usual cast of characters. And sign on to Gatorbait. If you care about Gators or college football, I dare say we have some wonderful articles written by our people like Franz Beard and others on GatorbaitMedia.com.
Yeah, no question. Happy Mother's Day. Mom's the greatest in the world. They go to more baseball games and sporting events than men do. I'm sorry. Yeah. As my friend Fran Cunningham said about his late mother, Browne, the woman has been to no less than 2,000 baseball games.
Amazing.
So
I know Beryl Duffy did back in the day. She was a better catcher analysis than my coaches were.
That's right. So listen to your mom. Happy Mother's Day, everybody. Until Monday, we got a great show. Have a great weekend. We are out of here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.